Hey guys, this is the story of Don Fury Studio. Hope you like it. Between 1981 and 1986, we did a huge number of live cassette recordings at the studio. I would guess maybe a conservative guess would be 3,000 sessions, but probably between 3,000 and 5,000 sessions with maybe in between 200 and 300 different bands. So it was a very busy time, and I met a lot of bands, and we put out a lot of cassettes out of the studio, and it was a very good environment to work in. We also did a few cool records in the early days. The most important and most famous are United Blood, which we did 4-track in 1983, and Victim in Pain, which we did 16-track on a rented machine in 1984. Compilations were a really crucial part of the New York hardcore scene, and Big City Records and Javi Savage did some really cool comps. In 1985, I recorded Sheer Terror for the One Big Crowd comp, and maybe Ultraviolence and the Psychos too. So it was a fun time, and there were so many bands working. I mean, just to name a few, the Lunatics, Ultraviolence, the Psychos, Warzone, Cro-Mags. The studio was crushing it for 5 years, but by 1986, the entire club scene in New York had slowed down, and the hardcore scene had slowed down. And there was some worry, that the hardcore scene had lived its best days, and that was pretty much going to be it. I was pretty worried about that too, but I thought that maybe this was the right time to take the next step towards making the studio a legitimate recording studio, which was always the first idea about the studio at 18 Spring Street. So in March of 1987, I spent every dollar I had and bought an 8-track reel-to-reel tape deck and the other pieces of gear I needed to make that setup work, and felt, okay, now I can compete with other small studios and maybe even with some big studios. So the timing couldn't have been better. Ray Cappo and Jordan Cooper had just started Revelation Records with Rabies so they could put out the Warzone Lower East Side Crew EP. And they were getting ready to put out the Together 7-inch compilation EP. So a month after the 8-track setup was in, Gorilla Biscuits was in the studio recording Better Than You. And Warzone came in and recorded As One. And Youth of Today came in and recorded Together. And Side by Side came in and recorded Violence to Fade. So it was just a really good match, another really good match. Don Fury Studio and Revelation Records. So 1987 and 1988 were pretty formative years for the recording studio. We weren't just working with hardcore and punk bands. There was a whole other scene going on in the city called anti-folk, mostly solo performers playing in restaurants or small bars. And 109 Records came in and did an entire compilation of that scene, including artists like Mark Zero, Lauren Stauber, Jennifer Blowdryer, Roger Manning, Joe Hurley, just to name a few of them, which was a really cool compilation and really covered that scene well. But the hardcore scene was taking off at the studio. In '87, Judge came in to do their first EP, New York Crew, and that was Mike Judge on drums and vocals and Porcel on guitar and bass. And then Sammy and Luke came in to do gang vocals at the end of the project. Side by Side came in and did an EP for Revelation Records. Life's Blood came in and did a record for Combined Effort. And Alone in a Crowd came in and did an EP for Flux Records. And there was one more very important EP, and that was Gorilla Biscuits, who came in and did their first EP for Revelation Records in January of 1988. That was an important record, and we'll be talking about that next. One afternoon in 1987, Ray stopped by with the Lower East Side Crew EP. This is a great photo with Todd Youth on the left and Ray on the right. When Ray handed me this record, I wasn't really sure where it came from, since Warzone and I hadn't done a reel-to-reel session for the record. Not that long ago, I called Jordan Cooper over at Revelation Records and asked him where the record came from. And Jordan told me it came from cassettes. So Jordan and I both think that this came from two different live two-track cassettes recorded at Don Fury Studio at the very beginning of 1987. Ray wrote a note on the inside of the jacket, and every time I open up the record, I read the note, and it's a really nice way to remember Ray and Todd Youth and Warzone and Revelation Records and back in the day.